Bert had one dream in life, to become a great magician. He started off by performing tricks for his family and close friends. As a jobless adult, he attempted to earn a living with his hobby as the amazing Kazo, performing mediocre magic shows here and there, earning barely enough to survive. Now, it wasn't that Bert couldn't perform the tricks, but his weak skills and lack of confidence caused many problems. He would often drop cards. During his card tricks, he got caught palming items while attempting a sleight of hand, and there's a 50-50 chance that any trick he attempted to perform would fail. Despite his best efforts, the only trick he seemed to perform successfully was losing assistants left and right. In an act of desperation, he decided to post an ad on Craigslist to find a new assistant. The ad simply read, "Wanted, magician's assistant, attractive female preferred, experience not required, contact the amazing Katso." Initially, he got a few pranks from his fellow magicians, sending them their own assistants to embarrass and humiliate him. However, Bert was not to be deterred. A few serious candidates did come, only to quit a day or two later when the tricks failed, or when they realized that the amazing Katso wasn't all that amazing. Bert was rehearsing at the only theater in town that would allow him to rent space in exchange for cleaning the theater, and failing as usual. He knew the handcuffs had an easy-to-release button, but for some reason, he couldn't get them to release. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but he had handcuffed himself to a chair with his hands behind his back, and he needed to use the restroom. "Need a hand?" asked a woman's voice that washed over him with a sensuality and warmth that he had never experienced. Bert looked up to see a woman with long, curly, raven hair, curves in all the right places, and legs in a pair of jeans that seemed to go on for days. "Well," he replied with a grin and a blush, "now that you mention it, a little help wouldn't hurt." The woman stepped over and quickly unlocked the handcuffs. "There you go." It was now that Bert saw her large violet eyes and found himself lost in them for a moment until his bladder made its desires known. "Excuse me," he said, and ran off the stage. Once his needs had been met and his hands were washed, he returned. "Sorry about that. Now what can I help you with?" She said, "I'm looking for the amazing Katso. I was told I could find him here." "All right, who sent you?" he snapped. "Excuse me? You heard me. Which one of those asshole magicians sent you? Was it Magical Steve, Max the Illusionist, or Isaac the Supernatural?" "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I saw an ad on Craigslist for a magician's assistant. The gal in the front told me he'd be back here. I'm guessing he's you." "You're a bright one, I'll give you that." "Look," she said, "I could see you're busy being handcuffed to a chair and shit, so I'll leave now. And by the way, you had them on backwards, which is why you're having trouble. I suggest you practice with them in the front so you could learn the feel of them. Muscle memory is the real trick with that one." The woman began walking away when Bert called out, "Wait!" The woman paused. Bert continued, "I'm sorry. May I try again? Hi, I'm Bert. To some, the amazing Katso. To most, I'm the amazingly terrible Katso." The woman turned slowly and smiled. Bert was amazed at how her smile made her even lovelier than before. "Enchantress," she replied. "Seriously?" "Why, what's wrong with my name?" she asked. "Nothing," said Bert. "It's almost too perfect for the name of a magician's assistant." "Does this mean I get the job?" asked Enchantress, sounding excited. "Yeah, sure, why not? I'll warn you, though, it doesn't pay well, and I doubt you'll be here longer than a few days." "Why?" Bert sat in the chair he had just been handcuffed in, hung his head, and pushed his blonde hair out of his green eyes and sighed. "Because I'm by far the worst magician in the world. The only thing I seem to do successfully is to make audiences and assistants disappear." "Wow, that sounds like a great trick." "It's not a trick. They leave and never return." "Oh," said Enchantress. "Well, when do I start?" Bert looked up at Enchantress. Her name seemed to fit her, though Bert doesn't know why he felt that way. "Is now too soon?" Bert taught Enchantress the few tricks he knew, explaining how they should work, showing her how he performed them. Enchantress watched and listened closely, making suggestions often. After weeks of rehearsal, Bert had booked a show with the local VFW as part of a variety show. They decided Enchantress needed a sexy costume, so she went to the local shop where the other magician's assistant went. Bert had only his tuxedo and cape dry cleaned in time for the show, and even broke out his top hat. On the day of the show, there were an assortment of dancers, singers, and musicians, and Bert was scheduled to perform early due to his reputation. He was checking the props when Enchantress arrived wearing a flowing purple robe. "Enchantress," exclaimed Bert, "you came." "Of course," she said, removing her robe. "Whoa!" exclaimed Bert. "What?" Bert stood in shock with a slight erection upon seeing Enchantra in the form-fitting purple, white one-piece, bare left shoulder, sparkling costume with a small skirt that matched the satin robe she was wearing just a moment ago. A pair of sparkling purple heels and stocking completed the look. You. What, is this not what I was supposed to wear? Enchantra, you're beautiful. Really, she said, blushing. I mean, you were beautiful before, but now, wow. Enchantra smiled. Really? Really. A man stepped back and shouted, The amazing Katso, you're next. Bert sighed. Okay, Enchantra, this is it. They moved the props to the stage, the curtain rose, and the show was on. The audience was just a few dozen old men, some in wheelchairs, and most were interested only in Enchantra. However, when his first trick was successful, Bert felt a new level of confidence. Soon, every trick he tried worked, bringing applause and raising his confidence. Are you ready for our big finale? Bert asked Enchantra. I think so, she said with a wink. The final trick was simple. Bert would cuff Enchantra and place her in her box. Then, Bert would stand on the box with a sheet that surrounded the box, raise it over his head twice, and on the third time, Enchantra would be standing in its place. They had practiced the trick and felt they had mastered it. Bert carefully cuffed Enchantra, bringing forth a few catcalls and wolf whistles from the audience. He helped her climb into the box and closed the lid. He grabbed a sheet and climbed on top of the box. 1, he cried, raising a sheet over his head. 2, he exclaimed, raising a sheet with Enchantra standing behind him. 3, it's me, exclaimed Enchantra, who dropped the sheet and was now standing on top of the box, naked, except for her sparkling purple heels. There was a collective gasp from the audience. No one could believe their eyes. There before them was the beautiful raven-haired beauty in all her natural glory. Her firm, round breasts jutted out, topped by 2 proud pink nipples. Their eyes followed down to the narrow waist that topped her full hips and led to her neatly trimmed bush, which was a triangle pointing toward her womanhood. Her beautiful long legs rested in the sparkling purple heels on her feet. Enchantra smiled proudly at the successful trick, and then looked down and giggled, Oops. She knelt down, picked up the sheet, tossed it over her head, and was back in her entire costume, including her stockings, a moment later. She stepped down off the box to show Bert, now cuffed inside of the box she had been standing on. As Bert rose from the box, the audience began applauding and cheering. Those who could not stand rose and gave them a standing ovation. Bert and Enchantra smiled as they took a few bows and then left the stage. The acts backstage were also applauding. Bert was sure it was because of his first successful show when someone shouted, How did she do it? Yeah, shouted another. That was a hell of a trick. Bert looked at Enchantra and whispered, What are they talking about? Before Enchantra could answer, the stage manager stepped up and said, Well, Bert, I must admit, seeing your tricks finally work was one thing, but when your assistant lost her costume, well, those old vets just couldn't stop buzzing about that. Think you two could come back next time and do the same show? Bert's eyes grew wide as Enchantra said, We've been working on that trick for weeks. I'm glad I didn't screw it up. So what about it, Bert? Stunned, Bert managed to say, yeah, would you excuse us, please? Before the stage manager could reply, Bert grabbed Enchantra's arm and escorted her to his dressing room. Once the door was closed and locked, he asked, What the fuck are they talking about? Enchantra smiled. I kinda had a wardrobe malfunction. Janet Jackson had a fucking wardrobe malfunction. Were you really naked on stage? I still had on my shoes. Bert rolled his eyes. Enchantra, how the fuck? I mean, you let a room full of men see you naked before me? Is that what you're upset about? Well, kinda. Enchantra smiled. Oh, I'm sorry, Bert. Would you like to see me naked now? Bert blushed. No, but what happened? I lost my costume, she said. No big deal, really. Now shall we gather our things? Bert was confused. How could Enchantra be so casual about the whole situation? It didn't make sense, but he didn't want to dwell on it. Together, they gathered their things and left. A few days later, Bert received a copy of their performance. While he saw mistakes were made, Enchantra was spot on perfect. Then it was time for the trick where she lost her costume, and he couldn't understand it. He was sure she was wearing it when she emerged from the box, and it wasn't anywhere to be seen until it reappeared on her body. The erection that grew in his pants, however, didn't disappear as quickly. Hello, Bert, exclaimed Enchantra as she entered the theater ready for more rehearsals. How did you do it? He asked, shifting his seat so she wouldn't see the tent in his pants and closing the laptop. Do what? The costume. How'd you make it disappear? Are you still fussing about that, Bert? I told you, it was a wardrobe malfunction. Tom from the VFW sent me a video of us. I had asked him before we performed to send it so I could see where we went wrong. No wonder those old men were hollering so much. You've got a hell of a body. Thanks. Oh, and thanks to the VFW, we got another show in the week. That's wonderful. See, Bert, you're not the worst magician in the world. Over the next few months, Bert and Enchantra performed many shows where Enchantra experienced a wardrobe malfunction and was naked on stage for a brief moment before her costume magically reappeared. Bert's own confidence also grew with each successful show, though he never seemed to be on stage when Enchantra's malfunction occurred. Bert had a DVD of every show sent to him to see what he needed to work on. Seeing Enchantra's naked body for even a moment caused an instant erection and fueled erotic dreams. Some including him fucking her in her own bed. Others had him fucking her on stage before a live audience while performing assorted magic tricks. Several mornings he woke up as he shot ropes of sticky cum in his bed, or his dick was so hard that it would bend steel, resulting in a desperate need to masturbate. Each successful show led to more bookings, and soon, thanks in part to some of Enchantra's ideas for new and more spectacular tricks, Bert's reputation as a magician swelled. Soon the amazing Katzo was booked as the opening act in a downtown Las Vegas casino 4 nights a week, a goal Bert thought he would never achieve. With Bert's growing success, it didn't take long for his biggest competitor, Magical Steve, to come around. He entered the theater quietly and watched the pair rehearse for several minutes, then began applauding loudly. "Bravo, Bert," said Steve, or should I say, brava to your lovely assistant. Bert sighed. "What do you want? Is that any way to treat an old friend, Bert?" "Bert," said Enchantra, "who is this man?" "Enchantra, this is Magical Steve. He's considered by many to be the greatest magician ever, though if you ask me, that title still belongs to Paul Silverstein." "Enchantra," asked Steve, "are you serious with that name?" "What's wrong with my name?" she asked. "Ignore him, dear," said Bert. "He's just trying to upset you." "There's nothing wrong with your name, my lovely lady," said Steve. "I just thought it was a stage name, like the amazing Katzo. It's her real name. Not that it matters. Now why are you here?" "I heard through the grapevine you were no longer Katzo the Klutz," said Steve, "and I also heard that you had an assistant who was drop-dead gorgeous. At least that part was true." Enchantra smiled. "Thank you." "Careful, Enchantra," said Bert. "Steve is notorious for trying to steal good assistants." "I don't know what you're talking about," said Steve. "I just came to check out my competition." "What are you talking about?" asked Bert. "There's no secret that you and your new assistant have been enjoying a recent flush of success. I've seen some of the videos. You've got a smoking hot body, my dear." "Thanks," said Enchantra. "So I had to see it for myself. Tell me, Bert, have you fucked her yet?" "Get out," snapped Bert. "No, really?" questioned Steve. "I said get out," roared Bert. Steve chuckled. "Fine. I'll catch you two later." Steve walked out and Enchantra said, "That was random." Bert laughed. "He's looking to steal you away." "Well, don't you worry, Bert. I'm your assistant, not his." Bert smiled. The two continued rehearsing and performing, building their following and reputation as the best adult magic show. One evening after a long rehearsal, Bert was admiring Enchantra's beautiful body. "How do you do it?" "Excuse me?" asked Enchantra. "How do you do it? You lose your costume at every one of our shows, sometimes even twice. How do you do it?" "Want to see?" "Sure. Can you do it in your normal clothes?" "Sure," she replied, and walked over and picked up a long sheet. "It's really simple. I just raise the sheet, and poof." Enchantra now stood before Bert naked, just as she was before with the audience, however, without her shoes. Bert stepped over and placed his arm on her firm, round breast. Her skin was soft and smooth, except for the hard nubs of her nipples. Enchantra exhaled softly, but made no effort to stop him. Bert tugged on her nipples, longing to suckle them, and said, "Beautiful, simply beautiful." Bert pulled his hands away as Enchantra said, "Thank you. Get dressed." "But I thought you wanted to fuck me first." Bert froze and looked deep in her violet eyes. "Excuse me?" "Isn't that why you wanted to see me do the trick, and why you touched me? I could see the tent in your pants." There was no denying that Bert was attracted and aroused by Enchantra. He had dreamt of this moment since the VFW show, and was now actually happening. Bert stepped over and kissed her, slipping his tongue into her mouth. Bert could smell the aroma of her arousal mixing with her perfume as he frantically removed his clothes. He led Enchantra to a small room where a sofa and dresser sat. He threw the cushions off the sofa and pushed out the mattress. "You live here?" she asked. Bert, standing in his boxers, blushed. "Yeah," he sighed. You now know my dirty little secret. Enchantress stepped over, sat on a mattress, and grabbed his boxers with her teeth. She pulled them over his engorged cock and dropped them to the floor. She then took his cock into her hands and admired the steel rod as she pushed back his foreskin. Want to see a cool trick, she asked. Yeah, moaned Bert. Enchantress pushed his foreskin back and slid his cock into her mouth. Bert struggled to watch this cock disappear into her mouth. He felt his cockhead in her throat, a feeling that Bert had never experienced before. Savoring the feeling of her warm mouth as she licked and sucked on his cock, he fought the urge to fuck her mouth the way he longed to fuck her pussy. He thrust a bit, only to hear her moan and suck harder. Bert grabbed Enchantress' shoulders and pushed her back, causing a pop as his cock was released. He grabbed her legs and spread them as wide as he knelt down. Her dark pubic hairs was neatly trimmed, and the arrow pointing to her pussy beckoned Bert. Her sweet aroma filled his nostrils and hardened his cock. Bert slid his tongue into her pussy. Bert's tongue probed her pussy as his fingers separated her ass. Enchantress squirmed and moaned. With 2 fingers from his other hand into her pussy, he sucked her hard clit into his mouth. Bert pulled Enchantress to the edge of the bed, placed her legs over his shoulders, and slid his cock into her warm pussy. Enchantress moaned as he entered her. Fuck me, she hissed. Bert smiled and began thrusting. He pushed deeper and deeper until he was in, pounding her pussy. Her breast shook with each thrust. Bert reached down, tugging on her nipples, fucking her with a force that he had dreamed many nights since they first met. The mattress squeaked, Enchantress moaned, and their skin slapped. Soon, Bert knew his orgasm would arrive. Where? Do you want me to come? He asked between thrusts. Enchantress waved her hand and screamed, Inside of me! Bert was sure he saw yellow sparks fly from her fingertips, but he thought it might have just been sweat. With a primal growl, Bert's cock pulsed and filled Enchantress' pussy with hot ropes of sticky cum. Her body shook as her orgasm raged, and blue sparks shot from her toes. This time, Bert was sure of what he saw, but focused on finishing the job. Oh my god, Enchantress chirped. That was the best fuck I've had in years. Bert agreed. It was a long time since he bedded a woman who satisfied him as much as Enchantress did. Once his orgasm had passed, he leaned down and kissed Enchantress. He wrapped his arms around her and drifted off to sleep. A few hours later, he arose to see Enchantress watching him sleep. Her breast hung in the open, and a soft smile graced her face. Slept well? Yeah, he replied. How long was I out? A few hours. Oh shit, sorry. It's fine. I enjoyed watching you sleep. Now can I share my dirty little secret with you? You weren't a virgin, were you? No, sighed Enchantress. I'm a witch. A what? A witch. Bert scowled. You mean a broomstick-riding, black cauldron-stirring, magic spell-casting witch? We haven't ridden brooms in over 2 centuries. The only black cauldron I owned belonged to my great-grandmother, and we used it to pass out candy at Halloween. Although, I do cast magic spells from time to time. Bert shifted away from Enchantress and said, So was fucking me the result of a spell? No, exclaimed Enchantress as she stood up. It was part of our natural human attraction. Then why did I see sparks fly from your fingers and toes? Well, my fingers keep me from getting pregnant. My toes were a side effect from my orgasm. To be honest, that rarely happens, so you really did a good job in making me come. Bert climbed off the bed and stepped away from Enchantress, scowling. So what? I'm not good enough to make a baby with? Do you really want a kid right now? Well, no, he snapped, but that's not the point. Well, then what's the point? Have you been using your magic to help with my tricks? Only the beginning. You what? You were such a nervous wreck. I knew you could do the tricks, but you lacked the self-confidence. Even when you started to show me the tricks, you struggled. That's why I made the suggestions that I did. Before long, you were doing them without my help. Then came the show at the VFW. I saw you make some mistakes when we first started, and your confidence started to disappear, so I helped you out. And the so-called wardrobe malfunction, growled Bert. Well, grinned Enchantress, I got caught up in my own tricks. And anyways, everyone loved it. That's not the point. Why are you yelling at me? Because you tricked me, yelled Bert. You made me think I was doing all these tricks by myself. You were, she yelled back. I stopped helping you months ago. Bullshit. If you weren't helping me, then explain why you stuck around. Because I fucking like you. I might even love you. And at the very least, I saw something in you that no one else did. And what was that? Screamed Bert as Enchantra grabbed the sheet, pulled it over her head, and had her clothes back on. Natural magic talent. Oh, please. Enchantra walked through the door. I thought you really understand. I thought I could trust you. Goodbye, Bert. Goodbye, he yelled. Enchantra stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Bert collapsed on his bed and punched his pillow several times. The air was electric with the energy of their fight and the aroma of their sex. How had I not seen it before? He thought to himself. I never knew. My newfound success was all because of her, and she's a witch. He dressed and began reviewing the video footage from other performances. He watched Enchantra carefully, catching some of the hand gestures she saw when they fucked, only without the sparks. How had he missed it? It was clear as day. Still angry, he went to bed. His dreams were plagued with nightmares of Enchantra turning him into an assortment of horrid creatures. He felt the pain caused by yelling at her, and he realized that she had done nothing to warrant his abuse. He woke up in a cold sweat, wondering how he was going to make things up to her. He showered, dressed, and checked his paperwork when a knock came from the door. Come in, he yelled out. A tall, well-dressed man with salt and pepper hair stepped in. Bert immediately recognized him as the legendary Paul Silverstein, master magician, and Bert's idol. Bert's jaw dropped. His eyes bugged out. He was certain Enchantra was nearby. Good morning, said Paul. No introduction needed, interrupted Bert. I'd know you anywhere. You're the legendary Paul Silverstein. And hopefully you're Bert, or rather the amazing Katso. I am. Wonderful, Paul exclaimed as he shook Bert's hand. So I'd been sent by the Magician's Council to offer you a lifetime membership. You what? Exclaimed Bert. We've been watching you, and since you took on this new assistant of yours, you've really blossomed. Speaking of which, where is she? Home, said Bert. She'll be in later. She had some personal business to take care of. Gotcha, said Bert. Well, I was hoping to meet her. But I will meet her next week at the induction ceremony. Induction ceremony? Asked Bert. Of course. Here it is, in this letter, said Paul as he handed Bert the letter. Bert looked at the letter on heavy parchment and gold foil lettering. He felt a deep pain in his heart as the memory of the fight with Enchantra raced through his mind. This invitation was the only thing he had longed for since becoming a magician, and it occurred in part thanks to Enchantra. Tears welled up in his eyes and escaped on his cheek. I don't know what to say. Say you accept, said Paul. You accept, I accept, said Bert with a slight laugh. Paul chuckled. I'm so happy to hear that. Now the ceremony is private, so only your lovely assistant may join you. And remember, you may never share what occurs in a ceremony. It falls under the magician's code. Well, I'll see you next week, Bert. Goodbye. Goodbye, said Bert, shaking Paul's hand one last time. Paul left, and Bert searched until he found Enchantra's address on her employment papers. He quickly grabbed his wallet and ran to the bus stop. Until now, Bert never felt the need for a car, especially since he couldn't afford one, and the buses ran often and late. He caught the bus and rode nervously to Enchantra's apartment complex. Luckily, there's a bus stop just outside. Bert checked the map and ran to her building. As he got close, he noticed Magical Steve's car parked nearby. Fearing he had lost Enchantra, he ran to the door. It wasn't fully closed, and he heard Steve and Enchantra talking. Bert's an idiot, said Steve. Why? I'd be willing to bet he's only successful because of you. Bert just needed someone to believe in him. And that someone was you? Yeah, she said. Bert could hear the pain in her voice. Well, if that's the case, then why did you leave his place in tears yesterday? What are you talking about? Oh, I was in a neighborhood last night, and I saw you run out of Bert's place, rather upset. I twisted my ankle practicing a new trick. She lied. Really? It wasn't because the sex was bad? What are you talking about? I've got a theory that the reason Bert can't keep an assistant is because he's a lousy fuck. He's not a lousy fuck, screamed Enchantra. Oh, really now, said Steve. Enchantra growled and asked, Why are you here? Don't you have your own assistants to pester? I want you as my new assistant. No, I'm Bert's assistant. I know, but you could be mine, said Steve. I can't be both of your assistants. Then be mine, said Steve. I said no. Bert pushed the door open and asked, Enchantra, do you still want to be my assistant? Bert, said Enchantra, surprised. You're here. You didn't answer my question, said Bert. Do you still want to be my assistant? Your assistant? Questioned Steve. You don't deserve her. True, agreed Bert, as he turned towards Steve. I don't deserve her, but I think the decision is hers. Yes, Bert, she said. I do still want to be your assistant. Bert rushed over and hugged Enchantra tightly. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry too, she whispered back. You've got to be kidding me, said Steve. And I think you should get going, said Enchantra, stepping back from Bert's hug. Bert and I have to rehearse." "I knew he was a lousy fuck," snapped Steve. "That may be true," said Bert, putting his arm around Enchantra, "but I just got invited to join the Magician's Council." "Bullshit," snapped Steve. "Really?" squealed Enchantra. "Here's the invitation," said Bert, handing her the invitation. "Oh, Bert, what an honor!" exclaimed Enchantra. Exasperated, Steve left in a huff, saying, "He'll never survive the initiation." Once Steve was gone, Bert looked at Enchantra and said, "He's right. I'll never survive alone. I need you, Enchantra, and I want you by my side." 1 week later, upon Bert's insistence, both Bert and Enchantra were inducted into the Magician's Council in a secret and private ceremony. The amazing Catso and his assistant Enchantra became the greatest adult-themed magic act ever known and headlined Las Vegas hotels all along the Strip. The end.